Tu je, mislim da je tu moderator. Lukasz.
We are live? Yes, perfect. Stay aside. I'll get a microphone.
You would be
right in the middle. I also have the voice recording from here to get better quality.
Here, Michael.
Just a second. Technicalities. Okay, it's recording. Perfect. So, hello everybody. Some of us left, but we still have a critical mass, I think, for good conversation here. So first of all, my name is Dr. Lukasz Porwol, and I am the coordinator of the Compact project that is co-hosting the event today. And we have our great researchers here. You know Tanja already, you know Andrey, Munir, and Oles. I hope you had a chance to have a chat in the corridors through the breaks. So in the morning and throughout the day, we had several different conversations here. We've heard the European perspective on the issues of media regulation and many issues that we actually researched in Compact. So now we would like to present a Compact view on the same issues, what our results are so far. So we are 2 years in, 1 year more, but the majority of the reports are already delivered and will be published shortly, which we are publishing on a regular basis, but there will be nice reports released soon, so stay tuned. And so maybe we will start with Andrey. Andrey will present some basic results from Work Package 1. And Andrey, I just give the voice to you now.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Well, we have done a lot, so some are examples you could see there, the desk behind, and we distributed in shorter version. But what I would like to discuss is basically we look at what is the global discussion about solutions and approaches to regulating or not social media. And we expanded it because there was discussion today mostly about fake news, hoaxes and all this, but there is in some countries discussion more broadly about social harms. You know, when people commit suicide because of something on Instagram is written about them, etc. So much broader. And this is one aspect. The second aspect is that there is a lot of discussion about regulatory aspects from legal perspectives, basically lawyers. But we have found that there is it is underestimated. This was actually mentioned also in the Budapest Symposium we had a month ago, that there is a technology, and it was mentioned today, algorithms, artificial intelligence, etc., or economy-based approaches like behavioral economy, basically, and many other options. And the point is here, which is mentioned in one of these materials, is that we have to, or the governments will have to tackle and use different approaches to regulating social media, sometimes even considering the purpose why particular social media are being used. This is really related to some niche areas, so it goes so far. But if we come back to the global perspective, we have done overview, many different sources, you can see them, like even the key ideas and countries, and when it was published, many European, but also non-European countries. And what is a lesson from this is there is variety of approaches, sometimes not really functional, sometimes old-fashioned, and it's evolving also, this approach is more and more interesting, and we have tried to put them into tables and summaries here, and you can see that it goes from traditional nation-specific solutions the breaking tech platforms, giants, taxation, data privacy, to as far as independently owned servers or new publicly owned social media platforms. This is very much this is how it evolved. So you can see based on categories, but also over time how it has evolved. So sometimes it's related to US election campaign before presidential elections. Okay, some candidates from the Democratic Party suggest this, but even before European elections in the European Parliament, some candidates, liberals especially, suggested breaking platforms or public European Facebook and all these kind of ideas. So basically, it's here, and maybe you can find more. It also includes courts, transparency, data sharing, which was very much discussed, support, technical editorial social co-regulation. So it's very much, it's very, if some speakers said it's very maybe confusing, very wide, it looks like that when you look at these suggestions. But also at the same very, very interesting because, and it's a final comment from me is that we have noticed that the European Union approaches to regulation of social media, even to the GDPR as such, are highly valued worldwide, especially in the United States, but in other countries as well. This is one aspect. The second aspect is also, which was very much mentioned, and you can find it in public discourses and media discourses, that authoritarian states tend to pick up some aspects of EU regulation or nation-state regulation, like from Germany or UK and France, and to incorporate into their regulations, their legislation, and arguing that this is what the democratic liberal states have, so why do you complain? So it was very much mentioned that, okay, Europe, be aware because autocrats are watching. Thank you.
Okay. So, Munir, I don't know if you would like to present something first, or we go on with this discussion.
Maybe we can go either way, but yeah.
Yeah.
Either way.
Okay. Annika, maybe you can put work package 3. Thank you very much.
Well,
okay. Is it okay?
yeah.
Yes.
I'm a little reluctant to show you this because those are pretty exclusive preliminary results of our research work.
And we are live, by the way.
Yeah. You know, there will be a lot of scrutiny over those results down the road and all that. But it is a very challenging task that we have. You know, in our working package, we are discussing pre-standardization and standardization initiatives in media convergence. Now that is all related to disinformation, and so when you put those three things in one pot, then it's complete chaos, and for researchers it creates a lot of issues and temptations. We covered 35 countries, European countries that are members of CEN, the main standardization body in Europe. So. It sounds all boring and technical, but actually results are everything but boring.
Other way around.
Other way?
To the right.
Oh.
Okay. No?
And now you just have to press.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Let me just go straight to the point. This is what standardization means, and what you all need to understand. It is pretty simple, you know. Develop standard, at the same time enables development, but as well constrains it. Now, what is important for us in Europe is that whoever first develops the standard, everyone else has to follow. And then the industry developments have to match to this plug-in. You know, you cannot design electric car, it doesn't have one of those plug-ins. It is a very interesting thing. Now, this is on the hardware, which is easy to show you, and probably the thing that you are all familiar with. Now, imagine digital industry. And how many of those plug-ins are there? and what standards do we follow, and who designs those standards. Now, in terms of this information, the key thing is that you need to understand a little bit about the how coding looks. You know, coding is basically, and how Facebook and everything else function, it has two things. It has a primary code and it has an algorithm. Primary code basically is defined in two blocks of codes, define the functionality of the thing, okay? And then there is algorithm that defines their specific interaction. This is the very simplified. Now, this algorithm becomes a standard when it's dominant. And let me just see. Because in standardization, we talk about three types of standards. De facto standards, which are defined by market forces. De jure standards, which is commission, and we heard all of those speaking today. And voluntary consensus, which is where industry actually sit together and defines the standard. Now, those de facto standards is what defines most of the digital industry. You have the giants who already put the things in place, they dominate the market, you are forced to follow. So it's de facto standard. So now when we talk about broken algorithms and broken democracies that derive from that, it is, just think about it, that whatever we do, we support it. Because it's already there, you cannot invent new thing, put new thing on the Facebook. Whatever you put on a Facebook, it has to be compatible with pre-existing platform, which is standard. And in the solution part, we are not looking into that. That's why I ask all those critical questions, like, okay, we are tickling the surface, but what about the infrastructure, which is already there, and it became a standard, and we are kind of very reluctant to touch it. So I'm not going to spend much time on that. I'll just tell you about few things that I find alerting in my research. You know, this is all what we had to go through and look at those. But those are, in terms of regulatory standards, those are four that are relevant for our research, and it's cybersecurity, it was spoken today, and data protection, internet filtering, journalist trust indicators, and industry best practices, and 5G, right? Now, let's see the performance on those initiatives, standardization and pre-standardization initiatives. We covered 35 countries. In cybersecurity and data protection, there are in total 8 standards and 15 pre-standardization initiatives. What is important for you to know is, although they looked at, they're done by CN, it is basically ISO standards, which are international standards. Again, the process and participation is different, and it's not the European market players that define those standards. There are some bigger players out there. This process is relatively transparent. However, participation is limited. Only 10 of European countries, I'm not talking now about member states, I'm talking about all 34, participate in design of cybersecurity pre-standardization documents and down the road standards. 12 simply say we follow the EU, and 12 have no data at all, which we then assume that they are not even interested in the subject. What this means that in like 2/3 of the industry doesn't participate in development of standards, which means that someone else is defining the rule of the game for all of us, which means then that we will have another issues and problems, and then we will sit 10 years from now and have headaches. Oh, how do we solve this? Look, this is disaster and doomsday and all of those things. Now, one of the things that is very important in a good standardization and pre-standardization initiative is pluralism of represented interests. So is there just one type of industry? Is it dominated by certain market players? This is really low. When we look into who are stakeholders in those working groups and that design those documents, you see very few SMEs, for example, because their countries don't participate. So there is no place to go and sit except Brussels, but that's expensive, and SMEs don't have money to come here and participate in discussions. That means, again, that who has more the money has higher impact on a future standard. And remember, the plug-in, the standard will define the development down the road. Those are things that we are not thinking of, that where some of the essences of our problems are, and we are not addressing it. And integrity of the process. There is no single document that says, you know, conflict of interest and this type of policies. If you have money, you pay membership, you come there and you participate in designing the standard. That's how this game works. Now, in internet filtering, there is only one standard in 2013 adopted. Do we think that internet filtering is not important? We talk about disinformation, information disorder, and all of that, and it all comes down to internet filtering, actually. That's where this micro-targeting is. And our last standard was developed in 2013. Is anybody mentioning the new standards in internet filtering? No. Do you know who are like members of this key members of working group on internet filtering? Microsoft was here, I appreciate that, but do you know who is the second to the Microsoft? It's Huawei. They're defining our standard on internet filtering. So is it really, you know, participatory thing, we're going to save our children and all of that? I don't think so. And 21 of the countries say that they follow the EU in this aspect and have no interest in participation. And 6 have no data. Really? We just stated, and everyone is stating that democracies are affected by misinformation and all of that, and there is no interest in initiating something on technological, because 60% of this problem, 75, is technological. It's not political, and we spend millions on political processes, but very little to see what is technology behind it. So it is, again, very low pluralism, there is no one there, and there is no integrity. On journalist and trust indicators, it is even worse. You know, Europe did take initiative in comparison to the rest of the globe, and we at least doing something about it, but it's not standard.
Sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but we still need to have some discussion. So if you
yeah,
sum it
okay,
up,
I'll sum it up. So journalist and trust indicators and 5G internet are put on a lower level standardization, which is working groups. Basically, some of the essential and most important issues that we need, they are left for the working groups, where again, there is no participation, no transparency, and no integrity. Now, when we discuss all of those problems that we were discussing this morning, just remember this. Whoever designed the plug controls the rule of the game and will define the developments in our future. So what do we do about it?
So a very controversial note for our discussion. Maybe I'd like to pass it to Tanja, because Tanja has very interesting results out there.
Thank you. So I'm leading the work package on policies and regulatory frameworks, which is like the hot topic in this area. And I would like to share with you some of the findings that we have by researching the initiatives that are addressing information disorder. So we analyzed around 140 initiatives from 24 countries. And the results, first I will say what was research actually. We analyzed their openness to different stakeholders, so is there a multi-stakeholderism in the process of information disorder combating? And by information disorder, we mean disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation, which are defined as 3 different types of what's the English word? Of information that is not desirable, undesirable, yes. So is there a multi-stakeholder perspective in the process? Are there any regulatory initiatives yet? Is there transparency and accountability? How much are the fundamental human rights addressed by all these processes? And where is technology in all of this? So what we found out is that there is very low openness to multiple stakeholders within one initiative. There are a lot of efforts that combat information disorder, but all of them are isolated and they are not coordinated efforts. So a lot of uncoordinated efforts. So coordination is needed, which is very much aligned with the latest action plan put out by the European Commission. This is okay. So another result is that from all the stakeholders, industry has very low presence. Most of the stakeholders are from the research and academics. So what that implies is that while we are trying to define what is misinformation and disinformation, while we're trying to put the definitions on a common ground, all those that are spreading the disinformation work their way out. And here we could make an additional recommendation to the action plan that is already in place, that we have to align the processes and the timeline of those processes on the same axis, so that researchers who are working on the problem are working at the same or similar speed with those that are creating the problems. Because, for example, when we did the research on fact-checking organizations and we wanted to give that fast-track research to the European Commission high-level group on disinformation, they said we need peer-reviewed results. And in order to get peer-reviewed results, there is a timeline of half to 1 year until you get the definition straight. So, so I very often imagine post-apocalyptic scenario caused by disinformation, and one academic rises up from the ashes and say, I have the definition on disinformation. No. Good for you. So we have to align all these processes across similar timelines and axes. And then another thing is that another result is that most of the objectives of these initiatives that combat information disorder contain transparency and accountability. And then when we analyze the mechanisms for the transparency of their own work and the accountability and the auditing processes, there is none. So they have the objective to combat towards more transparent and more accountable players in the field of information disorder, while they themselves don't have complaint resolution mechanisms, don't have monitoring systems in place for their own work, are not accountable to anyone, and the results and the methodologies they use are absolutely non-transparent. And then from the research on fact-checking organizations, we found out that it is very much relying on human effort only. So performance-wise, this is not the most effective solution. So technology is employed to a very little extent, And the financing, when you start touching upon the financing of all these initiatives, you see a large non-transparency there as well. For example, for the fact-checking organizations, we found out that over 80% of them are financed by a single source. So that's a bit no for the trustworthiness of the fact-checking organization itself. So what this means is that while you are fact-checking content on the internet, you are not being trustworthy of yourself. So the results that you produce are then irrelevant. These are some of the hot results, but I will leave for more interactive discussion.
Thank you very much, Tanja. So these were basically, these are leaders of the 3 core work packages in contract. So Andrey is leading work package 1, Tanja is work package 2, and work package 3. So these are like the core pillars. I don't know, would you like, Oles, to add something extra perspective to what was mentioned now?
Yeah, I would like to highlight 2 things. I myself am working also as a software engineering, in the software engineering company. So I'm involved in those bad stuff that we are discussing. And I'm more enthusiastic to view new technologies and their application from the perspective that it brings more opportunities in positive stuff. But still, the more opportunity it brings, the more threats and issues arise. So in general, the internet is broken. So it's supposed to be a place where everybody could share information and discuss it freely. But now social media is used to broadcast suicide, murder, all those stuff. The internet, the social media is also full of trolling and harassment. Fake news is our new reality. So when something is broken, you either throw it away or fix it. But obviously we cannot throw it away, so we should fix it. And the first highlight I want to say is before fixing it, we need to explain why. So we need to raise awareness and increase the digital literacy of people. Because, for example, when GDPR was introduced in Europe, in Ukraine nobody took it seriously. It's data protection, who cares? And this may be applicable to any other issues that we are discussing. So in our project, we released a number of policy suggestions that can be applicable, but I want to highlight that first we need to increase the digital literacy. And the second thing is digital world as basically has no borders, or the borders are transparent, but yet EU member states are trying to regulate it separately. So there should be one single approach and like united approach to tackle all those issues. Thanks.
Okay. And I would like to go back to one thing, Tanja, when you mentioned the types of disinformation, that you have non-information, misinformation, and that one?
Dismissed and mal.
And mal, exactly. And interestingly enough, most of the people actually don't know the difference, because I was engaging with politicians on the topic of fake news, if you can say, colloquially, and they wouldn't know actually what's the difference. So maybe you could quickly explain here now what's the difference.
Yeah, well, that's actually
and I will check out infrastructure.
The concepts are not put forward by us. We are following the conceptual framework that the European Commission is also following. So the definitions are, disinformation is what we commonly know as fake news or false information. That is there not necessarily put, that is there on purpose, so created to spread false information, fabricated content, etc. Misinformation may appear, but the intent behind it is not necessarily to cause harm or to be understood as false information. So it can be distributed by users who actually don't know that it's false information. So it's considered as misinformation. It's there, but it should not be there because the intent behind it is not to be spread as false content. And malinformation is just pure illegal and harmful content that is created, that it is very often taken from private context and put into the public sphere, so that very often private information that shouldn't have been where it's supposed to be. So breaking privacy is considered as malinformation. Illegal, harmful content, terroristic content, all of that is considered malinformation.
So I think using fake news term is maybe too specific. I would use harmful content maybe, right? Because you can have something which is genuine, but it's used with a bad intent.
Disinformation is the more general term. Okay. Fake news are under disinformation because they are often created on purpose to be shared then as false content. Yeah. They have purposeful intent behind them.
So I think important point is here that it's not only about fake news, it's also about real news, but basically used in a wrong way.
So we have the definitions,
Yeah.
It's like
but those definitions will drive policy because that might be missed, right? Of course, we just focus on what fake material will miss out on all those, right? And Andrey wanted to mention something.
Yeah, I would like to, this is follow-up to this, and this is related to this nice table prepared graphically by Oles. Basically, we came up with some of these issues which are maybe well known about niche group of experts, but it is related to social media. The point is here that we approach about 20 states, EU member states, and in each 1 to 3 institutions like ministries, national security authority, etc. And they ask them whether they are aware about these issues like immersive technologies, social media influence, micro-targeting, etc., bots, digital identity. And it was very interesting that there was very limited response rate, only from Romania and Bulgaria actually, and from Slovakia also. So, and one can wonder why is this actually next step we would like to explore, because it looks like, okay, there are many possible explanations, we discuss this, but there is lack of communication, exchange of information basically among member states, because some of them said, okay, we are going to deal with some of these aspects in this new version of Audiovisual Media Services Directive. Others said, we don't know, etc. Just please give us order for parcels, what we should do. So, and this is the most challenging, not only misinformation or whatever, but all these tools, which was mentioned by Oles actually and others, that technology aspects are very important, not only policy aspects. And these are targeting technology aspects, how to regulate them and how to prevent technology cause harms. And this seems to be like lack of cooperation, or at least lack of interest in these issues. We're going to explore it further, but I think this is interesting to mention and how it works in member states.
And I think in terms of technology, it's interesting what Tanja mentioned, that there is not many solutions fighting disinformation will be technological on the other side as well, right? So on one side you have technology which is not regulated, on the other hand we are missing out on technology that can help it.
Okay, we will touch upon it in the last panel as well, because what do we mean when we say technology is not regulated? What aspect of the work is not regulated? Because in the first panel someone mentioned, who was sitting here, Lukasz was sitting here, he mentioned that we do have regulation in the design processes of the traditional media systems, but we don't have those for the platforms, for the online platforms. But can we really have this? Because when you say design process, many of the design processes for technological platforms are not done by considering the effect they would have on the users. And most of the evolution of the platform happens by interaction with their users. So it's not the same principle of work with the traditional, when you compare that to the traditional systems. You don't see users defining how television, to that extent and to that scale, defining how television broadcasting will develop further. There is no such amount of user technology interaction happening so that you can envisage the processes that will happen. That is why you can put forward regulation into the design of these traditional systems. But when we talk about online platforms, algorithms, and technology, the human in the loop changes everything. So I don't think that we can speak about the same regulation processes.
Okay. So that was an interesting point, and I'd like to go back to some challenges, maybe latest regulatory challenges that largely Andrey identified. So I think the first one that appears, and we put this nice picture there with the fingerprint, is digital identity. And I think this is something that is underexplored and under-resourced. That there is several layers. It's identified 3 layers, right? In terms of digital identity, and the first one is quite obvious. It's basically your identity based on what you put on social media, on your public profile. So you are aware of it and you have control over it. Yeah, you can delete. You can export it. They promise they will forget. Hopefully they will, but you have some control over it. But there is layers of digital identity that we don't have control over, and this is knowledge that is inferred about ourselves and which is shared between different platforms and evolves as kind of our ghost or our shadow behind us. And we don't even know how it looks like, even though it includes most of our activities and personality. So I think Andrey would like to say a few words about this.
Yeah, actually, maybe you have noticed 2 weeks ago approximately there was news that US, UK and I think Australian governments tackled actually this digital identity and access to information, which was also discussed, which is available on the platforms vis-a-vis digital identity. And the point is that probably the key solution to all these issues, social harms, misinformation, disinformation, whatever, may lay in this digital identity if we are able to both protect identity and if it is necessary to reveal, terrorism, etc. Yeah, of course, it's very challenging, and the cooperation with platforms is actually necessary. So this is again, we are going back to platforms' role here, not only education awareness, but also platforms and in this aspect, technological aspects, how to regulate and prevent and reveal. So this appears to be the key to solution to other issues here we tackle, including like micro-targeting, etc. And this is new. As I said, we finished this, and a couple of weeks later was this issue, the UK, US, and Australian government approach to platforms. I mean, this is very interesting. This is new for us relatively, and we have to maybe more research and discuss about these issues. We are not talking about digital identity related to the use banking system, etc. This is already regulated by directive, one directive, but this is what Lukasz described, So basically we can go down to the solution in that way, because otherwise, as we have discussed today, it's a multi-layered issue. There are many issues, many stakeholders, and maybe this could be not simple, approach to that. But of course, simple in a way.
Tanja, you have a point there? Yeah? No? Okay. So I think it's important to say that some of those issues are basically somehow unspotted. They are not discussed. We have those buzzwords like, of course, fake news is kind of, I think, leading there. Mm-hmm. But there are different issues, and they are also propagated through emerging technologies. So, for instance, we also talk in our findings about immersive technologies, which are coming. So most of you are aware that virtual reality becomes a thing now and becomes mainstream. And very soon we will have social virtual platforms. They're actually already there, they are grassroots, but as the uptake of the technology is growing, this will become mainstream and probably as big as Facebook or Twitter today. And I think just a couple of weeks ago, Facebook announced that they are starting a new social VR platform called Horizon, which will start running next year. So it's coming, it's happening. But there is new challenges emerging there, and actually one of the major ones is again going to digital identity and right to privacy.
Yeah, I would like to mention this immersive technology, as you call them. It's interesting, again, it depends whether it is research or discussed by lawyers or technologies experts, because lawyers don't see what the technology experts can see, as Tanja mentioned here. So actually one of some recommendations would be the closer cooperation between lawyers and IT experts or data experts, basically, because otherwise, for example, in this augmented reality, there was difference when what lawyers saw as a priority, in this case US lawyers, and the technology experts. They said, actually, no, we need to regulate actually virtual reality more and sooner, because the issue behind was whether it is private sphere or public sphere. And lawyers said, if it is private sphere, we don't have to regulate, we can't regulate because it's private. And the other guy said from the technology or IT or data, said, no, this is not private, it doesn't matter even, because it has consequences, it can impact on humans, on psychology, on mental health, etc. So you cannot claim it's really private.
So, yeah, I mean, those issues are very, very interesting, and I encourage you to look at our reports, and you have on the back of the room, you can find some summaries there. Yeah, but I would like to say maybe a few words exactly about the legislation and regulation in general, also as I was editing my part. It seems like there is a need for more flexible frameworks and more kind of out-of-the-box thinking, like more horizontal legislation, because today is social media, tomorrow virtual reality, in 3 weeks it might be something we can't even imagine, like nobody predicted internet to happen. So I think we can only try to imagine what will be in another couple of years. And of course, we will face the same issue as we do today. Legislation process is too slow, and as technology grows and technology demands is ever growing, and standard demands are growing, still the whole framework is lagging behind. So there is a need for more flexibility there. And I would like maybe to give a voice to Munir to say something on this as well.
Well, the main point is that there are things that we can't do or shouldn't do, which is basically we should not block development. We need to be liberal in a sense to allow innovation to come and to try. But we should take some precaution measures. And one of those is that we could introduce the standards for the technological development, what it can and cannot do in a principle. And then once we design this, because one of the problems for example, with all what you see is the digital world, because it funds itself through advertising, prefers extremes, the most liked and most hated. It doesn't prefer the middle, which is traditional media approach, middle, moderate, balanced. No. It's either most liked or most hated. Now, remember what I told it, it became a standard. So now you can't produce the normal news because no one will read it, because digital streams are not detecting it even, You are not bringing them income because there is no attention, and therefore put it on a margin. If someone goes there and read it, that's fine, and otherwise it will not be touched. Then from this, it's just like grows. Every next layer is bigger. So going back to what Andrey said, and we had those discussions, there are certain things. We need to accept the digital reality of digital civilization. We are living in digital reality. That's part of our identity. We have this identity and this reality, but we also exist in digital reality. Each one of us, without our devices, we are nobody today. So we need to introduce civilization in digital world, in our digital reality. Because right now it's a Wild West. You have a bigger gun, you win. So this is basically how we need to start thinking.
But how, to me, when I hear you, it sometimes feels like we talk about standardization, but where is innovation, and in order to have innovation, you have to push borders, and by having all of this standardized, you have rigid borders. So how do you balance? Am I the moderator?
Yeah,
how
you can, no worries.
How do you balance between standardization and innovation?
We standardize principles, not the outcomes. Innovation is outcome of the process. But when you standardize the process and assure that it has integrity, transparency, participation, then this outcome of your process is safe. Those are the basic principles of governance, whether it is management, technology, or politics. Those cannot be changed.
But
It's like a Bible of management.
Why do you think that it's precisely innovation that drives towards new principles that then requires standardization? That you have another wave of innovation that requires new principles. That's evolution.
You
know,
need
it's
to
not
standardize the
West.
process. Again, you're talking about product, I'm talking about process. I don't care about product. Product is up to market players to design.
No, process. We're talking about the same thing.
But I need process to be transparent, that has integrity, that has accountability. So if you do something wrong, you go to jail. Period. End. You know, we cannot allow unethical innovation, because then all those medical companies are like, okay, I'm just waiting for this part. So technology is not different from medicine or any other science, you know, the electroengineering. It has its goods and bads, and we need to assure the ethics and integrity of this process. That's all what civilization requires. Otherwise, it's suicide. It's as simple as that.
Okay, that's a very heated debate, and I think we will not finish it now.
Let me start.
Andrey.
Just comment to this very briefly. Basically, yes, when you research these issues, you can find call for standards related to immersive technologies, bots, and digital identity. Different, not for harm, innovation, but because they need for their innovation and choose some standards, even for safety of people, prevent social harms, etc. So there are many different aspects of standards or standardization. That's what
I may act a bit as a devil advocate just before I give the voice to the floor. But I would say there's something in what Tanja said about innovation and standardization. I think that's what set us apart from Europe and US. US is always less strict on regulation, let's say, and they innovate, and that's why all the technology comes from there. And then Europe is thinking it through, and we have all the legal frameworks and ethical consideration, and our solutions are maybe safer and maybe in some way more robust, but it takes time, and they are first, and they define the path. And that's why we are then trying to do something about it, but it's already done. So there is always a trade-off, to be the first and to make the first path, or be later and make the nice road after that. But I would like to open the floor now for questions, because we took a while for talking to each other, and I didn't see any hands. Yeah? Oh, sorry. Yeah, please. Maybe you can pass the mic.
Yes. Thank you. Sebastiano Tofaletti from the European Digital SME Alliance. I was very intrigued by the figure you mentioned, the fact you mentioned about the fact-finding organizations, NGOs, that are then mostly financed by the same source. But then, so this shows that the system, the governance of the system needs much more transparency, and perhaps needs a little bit of somebody externally to set some standards, to regulate a little bit. So because you seem to advocate also for innovation, for more freedom of enterprise, so to say, but how do you manage to create a system which is transparent and govern in a good way for the users or for the society, if you do not want to impose any standards or any regulation?
If I tell you, I will have to kill you. I'm joking. Well, first, what I personally notice in all these debates is that when we say transparency, it's like we think a single thing, and there's one transparency to rule them all. I don't agree with that. I think there are shades of transparency. It's a bit oxymoronic, because you're either transparent or you aren't. But you have to decide at which level you want to be transparent. If we, for example, consider digital identity that we discussed, and we say that our appearance in front of the world is one thing, but the knowledge that platforms infer about us by our interactions is another type of knowledge and another aspect of our digital identity. So what is what you want to proclaim transparent about your digital identity? What is that you want to protect? And
no, I just want to may finish. I mean.
So, when we are talking about the knowledge that can be inferred about us, now I'm talking to you. You mentioned, because you talked about transparency, Miroslav, was that your name? Yes. So you mentioned that as a researcher, you are frustrated by the fact that you don't have access through the APIs of Facebook to the data that you would like to research. But doesn't that also make you feel more secure? Because attackers also don't have.
You don't know.
So what is the aspect of, what is the aspect that you want transparent? You want everyone to get access to data?
The data that we are specifically requiring is just the public data on public profiles, you know? We don't even have access to that. I'm not talking about private data on anybody's
Yes, but then you're talking about transparency of the algorithms that underlie the platforms, if we move from the technological aspect. And if you have those, that also means that you can attack directly the platforms themselves through the algorithms. So I'm not advocating about security for obscurity, but sometimes transparency is not the desirable goal that you want to.
I have two issues. One, to answer your question, basically, there is standardization among this fact-checking and fake news that the banking organization, which is association of this organization, which set some standards and ethicals, like actually related to transparency of
Code
finance.
of conduct.
Yeah. So they have it. Like all of them are members of this, but there is already kind of standardization in that sense, which ensures the transparency. But in the second, I'm not so sure what Lukasz said that standardizations in effect kills innovation.
No, we didn't say that.
No, I didn't say, but I mean the point wasn't like that. I mean that harm, let's say, okay, harm, so
Encumbers, it's not
yeah, but I don't think so. It's necessarily so. Maybe it's not correlated. I mean, this is just something else. I don't know.
I mean, if I may on that, I mean, I am a member of standardization community for many years, and I think it is quite the opposite, to be honest with you. Yeah. Because you have, where you have a very limited innovation, or where you can have innovation, you have these proprietary silos, technology proprietary silos. Think about companies like Apple, okay? Who can innovate there? Only Apple, because they are the proprietary of everything. Whereas when you have a standardized technology, the interface is open, and that sets the baseline. And then you can have many other companies, especially SMEs, that can innovate on top of the technology which is made available to all. So, you know, it's not that simple as, yes, where there is standards, there's less innovation. Sometimes it's quite the opposite. So,
I agree.
Other questions? There was more hands there, I didn't see. No? Please, can we pass the microphone? Yeah.
Thank you, Mikko. You talk about the ethical guidelines or the principles. Is there any to guide the development of the standardization, for example? Is there any kind of a policy reference on that one? Has it been ever done? Because this is what I understood, for example, that there was a high-level group on artificial intelligence, and they were really striving for this ethical consideration, which is practically have to bring some ethical consideration to the digital world. That's what it's all about, but how? Any reference or anything that would help us?
Thank you for the question. This is my concern. There is no, at least in the areas that were that I looked in depth, because you know there is strategy on guidelines, how to develop guidelines on innovation, and which is very vague, and I think only a few countries have adopted this strategy, which could be maybe step in that direction. But in terms of the, let's call it information exchange, you know, let's talk about internet. There is no such a thing. And this is what worries me, because we left the market to solve itself, which didn't happen, because Facebook has no competitor, Google has no competitor. Then, whenever this situation happened in industrial era, the government stepped in and say, break the company, we need competition. That's not possible. So we need alternatives.
There are frameworks, though,
No.
I'm aware of, but not standards.
There is no standard on ethics in development in this area, which is needed, and that's all what I'm talking about. I'm not trying to block the innovation. Innovation should be pushed and paid for, but we need guidelines on ethical conduct. We need certain rules to make sure that things will work for the people, not against the people, and against the nature, against the earth. So this is where we are now, and it is affected by the digital giants. I have to say, they are one to blame at this stage, because they want to block everyone else accessing it. They want to preserve their position of monopoly. That's why Mark Zuckerberg had his speech saying at the end, I won't do it, period end.
Yeah, but I must say that I need to corroborate what you said in terms of a lack of a paucity of ethical frameworks, because I work at the Insight Center for Data Analytics, which is Irish largest research institution, and we were the first to come up with Magna Carta for data. So there was nothing about ethics and data out there, and we started an initiative that is revolving now and spinning, but it's ongoing. So there's not much out there in terms of ethics. But I want to take this chance again to act as devil advocate, and from the perspective of researcher working with data analytics, I must say we were affected by privacy laws and whatever impact it had on Facebook and Twitter and so on and so forth. Because before we were analyzing data freely, we could gather data from Facebook, do marvelous analysis, social research, and so on. Now we can't do anything because we just can't get any data. So it was mentioned before, the good guys can get it and the bad guys can get it. But it actually hinders innovation, because we cannot do research anymore on Facebook. We have to rely on Twitter, which is very small. Nobody uses Twitter in Europe. Everybody's on Facebook, but Twitter is 2/3 of it is in US, and then in other countries nobody's using Twitter in Europe. So where should we go? We cannot innovate in Europe because of the privacy laws. So there is a trade-off there, obviously. Okay, 3 questions now. So I don't know who's first. Can I get a microphone there? Sorry.
Yes, I just wanted to comment on this transparency issue, because yes, good guys and bad guys can get it, but the trouble with the research sector and the civil society is that basically the businesses still can get their data through APIs. It's just the NGO sector that, you know, the digital platforms wouldn't talk to. So I think the bad guys, in other words, can still get the data, but it's us who actually can't do the research. So I have more of a comment rather than a question.
You can pass microphone forward.
I also wanted to react to the previous question when you discussed the access to public versus private. So on the access to public accounts or pages, I don't think you need to, I mean, I generally do believe that there should be algorithmic transparency in the long term, and that should be the end goal, but that has nothing to do with understanding the algorithms. I mean, I think what we need when we want to research the public pages is basically access and some historical data. Because what we currently get, I mean, in Twitter you have 7 days data that you can get pretty easily, I would say. For Facebook, it is more complex, but you can still have tools that would be able to scrap. But NetVis doesn't work anymore. I mean, that was a wonderful tool where you could really have some history data. And I agree with Mirka that CrowdAngle is available for media. Yeah, I mean, now media, because social media want to support this business, they make it pretty much available. So you can actually, with CrowdTangle, you can get whatever you need, I mean, from a research perspective. But if it's available for the media, why it cannot be available, let's say, for research type of...
Yes.
And to the last point, I do understand the issue of data privacy. It should, of course, go also to research. It should not be, we should prevent Cambridge Analytica scandal. So I do agree that there should be some kind of, we should impose some kind of ethical rules on ourselves. And I think this is already happening, that, for example, there are groups that are trying to go and research WhatsApp, which is a closed, I mean, mostly it's a closed platform with some exceptions. I mean, but even look at the organizations such as First Draft News, they would not go inside these groups, they would not scrap the data inside, they set up a public hotline, and then you can so if you are working with this type of data, it should be anonymized. There should be some minimal rules which should be made, but doesn't mean that we should be prevented from having some kind of access if we are ready to follow some ethical rules.
Before I answer, small question.
Just a small note. CrowdTangle is owned by Facebook, so I would love to use something else. And I mean, there's a very good Horizon project who have come up with the tools to do that, but that's just a mark. But the GDPR is 1 year old about, and there's a lot of people who believe that it has a lot of potential. Now it's a big blame game that, you know, is it good or bad because it's hindering that and that, but can it be developed to address the problems that you are saying, because it's practically it's ethical code to some extent as well, and it's something revolutionary. I mean, the politicians are so proud of it, so they don't go around it. But just can it be developed?
To these two guys, okay? Just comment to our colleagues in Slovakia. Basically, a year and a half there was initiative by platforms that you can submit a research proposal and they will provide you access to data for free. Have anybody tried here, to this program? It was very much publicized, a year and a half ago. They said, okay, we will give you data, submit proposal, even money we will give, whatever. So it was, nobody has probably tried it, right? So we shouldn't blame always platforms because they said at least they would provide data if there is research, right? We know that. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. The GDPR is amazing start. We really need, if there is anything to congratulate us, because my research was really critical of Europe, falling behind and all of that. But there is one thing where we are ahead of the rest of the world, and that's GDPR. There are 2 directives that follow now GDPR that will heavily affect the internet business, basically. And there is opportunity to do something there. And it is amazing. And then, of course, there is this, however, thing. Directives are compromises of many. It is European political and economic space, and then idea comes as a very noble, and we want to do everything there, and then there are member states saying, I don't know really about that, it affects me. I mean, what is Ireland going to have position on this? Because the giants are sitting in Ireland, they have to protect their own budget. It's funding actually schools and healthcare, and it's not that simple, So what Germany is going to say, like, whoa, but we just put the artificial intelligence in our cars, so now you want us to restrict this and to expose us and all of that. So it is, very complex game. That's why I say that ethics of the process is very important here. We need to assure participation. We need to assure voice of SMEs. there, and they cannot be in Brussels. Someone has to pay them to come here, you know, because they don't have money to come here and discuss their case. Maybe they have innovation, but they can't discuss it, and it cannot become part of the future standard. And we didn't resolve this. And that's part of the equation that doesn't work, and it urgently needs solution there, because without the participation, there is no democracy. Period end.
Okay, let me disagree slightly with you, because when we were working on these challenges, you know, from our point of view, we approach partners with our consortium, we are the digital SME, small medium enterprises. One is here, you know, there was a Bascom in Bulgaria, and there was another one, and Denmark. And basically there was one opinion after some pressure from the local Brussels-based digital SME, but the others, they said, okay, this is wonderful, we agree, and the third one, they was silent. They didn't provide any opinion after 4 questions I asked them, or emails. So they get voice heard, but they don't have clear opinion on that. But these are associations, digital, small, medium enterprises. So, I mean, I push them, if Lukasz knows that exactly, please provide answers. I said, please say, okay, we don't care, we are not interested in this, whatever, you know. So it was like that.
I can answer this.
Yeah.
Oh, you provided.
Maybe
You
it's
mentioned our members as well.
Yeah.
It's just, no, it's good to have that feedback, but this is, we know that. And that exists because they typically, these are small associations, and they represent the SMEs, and they don't have really anyone in-house capable to deal with those topics. So what they say is, we pay a fee to the European Alliance, to the Digital SME Alliance, and we trust their opinion. And they are those who are supposed to do this job because we don't have the means to do it. So they say each of us put something, helps you a little bit with the contribution, just that you can do the job for us.
Okay.
And it is, I agree with you, it is sad because even when you ask them the opinion, they sometimes cannot formulate an input. Huh?
Yeah.
But
So we are very open, we actually we're providing service, you know, for all these partners, you know, on the behalf of Commission. So I was shocked actually that I have to ask repeatedly digital enterprises, what is their opinion on the immersive technology boards, what they are writing suggestions, you know, and so, you know, so it's not like that. Sometimes you get misleading image of it.
Yes, no, but let me just make distinction.
Right.
Now you're talking about associations. I'm talking about SMEs.
But these associations, SMEs.
No. Association is simply NGO, participatory people are there and they associate themselves. Now, in innovation, in standardization, it's not the actually association nationally that represents you. You need, right, participation means that you as a business, as a small enterprise, have right to pay membership and sit in the actually board that defines the future standard, and that's how your participation works.
Let me
you know.
Sorry. First, I think it's their business how they are organized to express their opinion of their members. I don't care, it's their business. The first is I actually suggested, please, what they should do, I said, send this message asking them explicitly this question, and it's very easy by email to answer and collect answers. Okay, they could do it in a different way, like the top association, headquarters can issue opinion either by lawyers or whoever. There are many possibilities. Basically, there was an opportunity, and I would defend in that aspect our work in the Commission, that they try to get voice heard by the digital.
There was a question there.
Is that like that?
There was a question in the audience. There was a hand, no? I thought there was, no?
Yeah.
That's good discussion.
Okay, maybe we answer, but I wanted to relate to comment on the GDPR and the potential. I think that there is a potential, obviously, there, because this is our European baby, and it's very nice that people look up to us. Like I myself, I'm going to present in Dubai. I've been invited there as an invited speaker to talk on the same issues in the international symposium. And I think there is a very high regard for what we did in Europe, and we should lead on that way. And definitely things have to be well defined, and maybe some special, I don't know, explicit disclosure maybe on the use for researchers, that would help, for instance, those cases we mentioned. And I think that would solve the problem, because it's not only a problem with the big platforms, but even the small players. I try to get data from smaller players, and they say we are afraid because we don't know what does it mean for us. Because if our customers get to know that you use our data, they might be not happy. Even it's, so there needs to be a rule saying this is okay, this is ethically sound. If you say you are not using it for any of these bad things, it's fine. And we need that, and I think GDPR is the way. Also the audiovisual IDMSD, the new one, also introduced new things, and hopefully that will evolve.
Maybe just one thing, for talk. Yeah, GDPR affects the services, but not the industry, actually. I just realized that we are talking about two different things. Huawei is not affected by GDPR, and it does to our data a lot of things that you cannot imagine, not on a way where it would be basically punishable by GDPR, but on a different way. It sends to the center data on our technological behavior, basically. That's what they are analyzing. They call it user experience. This is the kind of in the essence of battle right now between the US and China. Exactly this part of that device. So, GDPR as a principle is something that is way advanced than anything else on the planet, but it didn't translate to the technological standards, let me be precise, because there are pre-standardization initiatives that maybe will have a little bit of it, but so far adopted standards are ISO standards, not European standards. ISO means global. So global means everyone is there. US, China, Europe is just one of the players. So GDPR is not there. When you look at the adopted standards in data protection and cybersecurity, there is no specific European standard on that. So to respond, maybe to improve situation, we should go after specific European standard in this, and set another bar for everyone else to reach.
And I can say, I think in this case, actually, regulation supports innovation explicitly, because now somehow research is unlocked with those enterprises. So researchers who work for industry have access to that data, but researchers working at universities and broader academia, they don't.
Yep.
So actually, that's a kind of self-perpetuating thing. So we have researchers working in industry for industry goals, rather than having equal opportunity here. So I think this way, actually, this can spin innovation. But I think we have to finish. And I don't know, Annika, I think we are way over time now, I suppose.
You're on time, but we can break now for coffee.
I don't know if there's any more question. Okay, so we are finishing at 3, yeah? You said, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so we still have a couple of minutes if there is any more questions. Otherwise, we just break for...
Amazing questions, actually.
Amazing questions. Yeah, thank you very much. So, and I invite you to join the other one just right after the coffee break. Yeah? Thank you very much.
Thank you for mentioning this.
Oh, you are really supportive.